frequently quoted. It began, "What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and then run? Maybe just sags like a heavy load? Or does it explode?" Well, it exploded in Lawrence multiple times in 1970. As I say, Langston Hughes lived in Lawrence as a boy for 10 years. His years in Lawrence influenced his life deeply, as well as his poetry. He was ordered to testify once before the Senate Internal Securities Committee, sort of the Senate's McCarthy Committee, and said, "What are you? Are you a communist?" He said, "No, I'm a poet." He said, "If you want to understand me and my poetry, you've got to understand Lawrence, Kansas." Langston was an optimist, as I think I was, am, still I hope. So let me conclude with another of Hughes's poems, this one entitled, "Let America Be America Again." Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain, seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great strong land of love, where never kings connive nor tyrants scheme, that any man be crushed by one above. It never was America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath. But opportunity is real, and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet. And yet it must be, the land where every man is free. The land that's mine, the poor man's, Indians, Negroes, me, who made America, whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain, must bring our mighty dream again. Sure, call me any ugly name you choose. The steel of freedom does not stain. From those who live like leeches on the people's lives, we must take our land again. America. Oh yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be. Thank you. Yes.
As a student here in the 1940s, let me relate a couple of things that happened that I have never heard of repeated. In the spring of one of those 40 years, we were talking about the segregation at the Union. There was an all-campus vote to permit the Negro students to sit anywhere they wanted to, and it passed. The students determined that the black people should sit anywhere in the Union Fountain if they wanted to. And before then, they sat in one corner. After that, along in probably the spring of 45 or 44, 2 black women were elected to the student council because, I mean, they were outstanding women, and there was a feeling that they should be represented. And those things went without the publicity that many of these other events have had. And there were many of those things going on campus. The 45-46 school year saw an integrated, international, interracial house just down the block here, where undergraduate women lived together. And I knew the women who supported that, and one of them was here a few years ago.
Was that Henley House?
What?
Was that Henley House?
It was Henley House. Before that time, the rooms upstairs had been rented to graduate women. And the undergraduate board went to the advisory board for the Y that managed the house and said, we would like for you to change that and rent to undergraduate women. And those women said they would. And that was, you know, that was a large group of a mixture of local women and faculty women. And so, but
that's what I meant when I said there was a civil rights movement and protest, certainly
it was
in places
just
that
starting. I mean, there was a lot of it in those years.
And a lot of it, as I said, came from the co-ops.
They made their progress through the system that was there at the time. And there was quite a large group of houses right south of campus where Negro women lived. And I happened to fall heir to the job of calling on those women before a student election. And I was appalled at the living conditions, but it was the best that they could find in the homes of Negro families here in Lawrence.
Yeah.
But that the women who were trying to do this had the full support of Dean Milan, according to what one of them told me 2 years ago. These were
I have a hard time accepting that, based on other things he's done.
These 2 women who were working on that were from Atwood, Kansas. You can imagine, I don't know how many, whether there were any blacks in that area or not. But they and their black friends here would go downtown to have a Coke somewhere, when the proprietor would say, well, they would serve the black girls at the back door,
Right.
they would all get up and walk out. And when that money walked out the front door, the proprietors changed their mind. And
Well, as I
those
said, by
poor women-
1954, there were
those poor
38
women
restaurants.
enjoyed their Cokes at the counter, just like everybody else. And they did the same thing at the theater. When the ushers would come and tell the black women they had to go upstairs, they walked out. I mean, not
Well,
only.
I think the
black-
theater situation was solved by Murphy, rather
Well,
than
they-
any willingness
They
on
did
the
this
part.
in the 1940s, it was done.
Right,
I mean, and this has been written up in one of the local papers out there.
okay.
But
Let's get to any
it's
other
interesting
questions.
that people were doing this on their own, and they were being able to do it on their own.
We'll have to talk more about this. Let me see if there are any.
There was no publicity about it or any other thing, so no one knows that this was going on.
Right, let me see there. Yeah.
When Lawrence High demanded a course in Black history,
Mhm.
did they get it right away, or?
I came here in '67, and in '68, I met with the NAACP, Francis Horowitz, and other people you know. Francis Horowitz and a number of us met, Judy Thompson, Georgiana Galinsky, and the NAACP with John Spearman Jr. and Beverly Southard to ask for, they wanted some help in presenting their demands to the high school. They wanted a list of books in Black history and culture, and we did that as well. So that's when that really began, I think, 1967, 68. But it was a tough struggle, and as you know, it got very, very violent before it was all over. I forgot your question again. Your question?
Did they get it?
Huh?
Did they get it?
Did they get the class?
Did they get it?
It took a couple of years, but they got the class.
And who
In
taught
fact,
it?
when he's an attorney now in Wichita, Leonard Harris, I think. Yeah. He was John Davis was maybe the first black attorney in Lawrence, and this was his grandson. And he's now on the board of Advocates for the Library. He's still very much involved in KU activities, but he taught the first Black history course. And it was probably in '69, I think so. And other courses in Black literature too. Yeah, Betsy.
Thanks, this was so wonderful. As someone who's new to Lawrence particularly, it was wonderful to have this education. And as per your beginning comment about how things actually became worse for African Americans in Lawrence in the Reconstruction turn of the century period, do we know anything now about enrollment of students as compared to the 60s and 70s?
Okay.
Numbers in terms of, many universities have experienced actually in this period when so-called multiculturalism has been celebrated. In fact, black enrollments have declined in many state universities since the 1970s. And I just wondered if you knew anything, if you could add that. And then could I just add,
Yeah.
do you have, if you wanted to put Native people into the story through what's happening at Haskell in any of these periods or in student organizations, were there any places where those overlaps came together?
I think Haskell was, to answer your second question first, was so isolated from most of Lawrence. Haskell students could only go downtown on Barker Street, or was it on Massachusetts Street? One or the other. They could only use one street to get downtown. Some Haskell students worked in white households as domestics. But one experience that, we'll go out there sometime, and everybody should see this before they leave Lawrence. and that is the cemetery at Haskell.
Oh,
These little headstones,
mm,
and these were not college-age kids, these were kids
Children.
8, 9, 10, 12 years old. Sometimes it would be an anglicized name, sometimes a native name, the name of the tribe. And it's quite incredible. So to me, it provides insights into what was going on. But I just think that Haskell was so isolated from the rest of the town. On the student enrollments, do you know about,
Well, at the turn of the 20th century, proportionally, KU had more African-American students because, as Bill mentioned, because of the neighboring states, we had a number of students from Missouri, Oklahoma, and so forth. So proportionally compared to other universities in the region, we had a higher percentage of black students, although it was still only in the hundreds maybe.
yeah,
When you talk about more recent history, 1970 and forward, I mean, our percentage has always hovered around 8, 9, 10%, which reflects the percentage in the state of Kansas, but it's still not what it could be, and it's gone up and down a little bit. I mean, I think it's actually been a little bit better in the last few years, but it's always been a challenge, I think, in terms of it's probably both recruitment and retention.
One thing to
being
point out
huge
too is
issues,
that
yeah.
at the turn of the 20th century, I say the 1890s, turn of the 20th century, the Lawrence black population was about 25% of the total population. But people left. There was no opportunity here, there was no decent employment. Some had gone to KU, but they went to Kansas City, they went to Chicago, they went to Los Angeles, they left town. So I'm not sure what the black population is now, about 5%. It's much, but again, at the turn of the 20th century, so you had Vermont Street, the 600 block of Vermont Street had a black hotel, had a couple of black restaurants, had a black funeral home. Around 19th and Tennessee, which was another, blacks sort of clustered in certain neighborhoods. There was a racetrack for blacks there, and the Green Book, which you might have seen, for blacks touring the United States, where can we stay, where can we eat, listed a hotel in the 1900 block of Tennessee. It's a big house, but at that time it was a hotel and a place where blacks could stay if they were passing through town. So things changed, and again, when the population was 25%, there were black attorneys and black doctors and all sorts of black businesses of one kind or another. Yes?
Could you speak about the role of the clergy, particularly in the 60s and 70s? I remember that the pastor at First Methodist Church, Ron Sunday,
Yeah.
organized a group to march to South Park the Sunday after Martin Luther King was killed.
mhm.
And he specifically said, "We don't want your prayers, we want your feet." And there was a large group from the Methodist Church as well as in Plymouth and some other churches who met that particular day.
That's absolutely right. And I think that the campus ministers who worked at ECM too,
Absolutely.
Otto Zing and others were
Yeah.
very much involved in the civil rights movement. And of course, there was I think they called themselves the Ecumenical Council, but that was black ministers of 9th Street Baptist and St. Luke AME and church and other black churches. They also were very much involved. So I think the clergy is an important element in the march for civil rights, for sure. Well, yeah. Dennis.
Just one comment, in working on territorial history, I think a little bit surprised to find out that a lot of the Free Soilers, and some of those who were professed abolitionists were fighting a political battle, not a social battle, and they were not very tolerant, and many of the Free Staters who came from the South were very racist,
Yeah.
even though they were fighting for Kansas as a non-slave state. It would be difficult or it'd be an error to assume that just because there was this battle about the free state that everybody who came here was opposed to slavery, because it wasn't even close.
They didn't want to compete with slave labor, for
Exactly.
one thing.
Whites
And,
were appalled.
yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think there's a big difference between agitating for freedom and supporting equality.
Absolutely.
So they could support freedom up to a point, but not racial equality
Yep.
at all.
Do you think that this article that was in the Journal World, I think yesterday, about I think about 12 or 15 congregations that are getting together to talk about justice and where justice is
Yeah.
lacking in our community. Do you think that the kernel of that is racially concerned?
I bet a lot of it is, yeah. I saw that article, it was very, very strong. But I believe so,
I think the AME, there were a couple of AME churches in that,
yeah,
that were listed in that.
that's right.
But there were also some churches that one thinks I was being very open-minded that were not listed.
I'll have to look into that.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much.
Good job.